Thank you very much for attending our second partner training this week. We had the first one 2 days ago for the Asia Pacific region, which went very well. This was for me at a bit of an easier time because this was at the normal business hours in Australia. Europe is a bit harder for me because here it's at the moment 10 p.m. So if I'm not as enthusiastic as I normally am, I have an excuse. It's getting a bit late here, but I will try my best, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you. Let me just quickly kick off the training with a bit of an overview about us. We were originally founded as a specialist for analytics and planning solutions, as a consultant, where we've worked with all of the major technologies on the market. And in 2015, we decided to build our own solution, predominantly driven by the rise of cloud accounting systems and commodity analytics solutions. And our aim was with Acterys to provide end-to-end performance management for business users, so in control by the business user. So what's our agenda today? In the training, we will cover the entire spectrum of Acterys, from initially looking at how is Acterys working with data models and what functionalities Acterys offering around what we call our one-click connectors. So to connect your particular accounting system, then with one click generate a data warehouse, either in the cloud or on-premise. The second topic here is to look at the generic connectors that we have, a tool called Cube Wizard that allows you to connect to pretty much any source and build your data models from there. And the data model in our world is typically always a relational star schema data warehouse. But what makes us very different is, on the one hand, of course, the quick generation, but then also that this is a write-enabled data warehouse. So it carries at the heart, has an engine that is built for high-performance, multi-user write-back from a variety of front-end solutions. I've just mentioned it. So the next step after you have built the model is the model maintenance. So how can you edit your model? How can you do model-driven creation or concept-driven creations, as opposed to having already the data in a solution? What are the options to create completely new models? And then we're looking at another important aspect there, which is governance, user rights, and audit trail. And then finally, we'll cover the front-end operations. So how can you work with the custom visuals that Acterys is offering in Power BI, particularly for write-back, forecasting, and planning. And we will also be looking at the Excel integration, where we provide the same thing, but from the familiar Excel environment. And then we will close the event with a Q&A round where I invite everyone to ask their questions. You also have the option, there is a Q&A option in Zoom. So at any time, please feel free to ask your questions, just type it in. I'm also happy because the last time in Australia, we had everyone on mute. We are a fairly small round today, so there's also no problem to talk. It might be a bit quicker and maybe a little bit more interactive. So if you like, you can also ask your questions directly and talk with us. So what's in it for you? What Acterys is, one of the key focus areas of Acterys is fast model generation. So what typically consultants spend a long time on, building models, customizing models. What Acterys is offering them to make this much, much faster. So as I mentioned before, with our one-click connectors, you can generate a data warehouse with really just one click. And our other solutions also make the process much, much faster. So speed is one of the key things that we can offer. The second thing is obviously write-back and planning. So we are at the moment the most comprehensive solution if you want to write back from Power BI. If you have more comprehensive requirements, top-down, bottom-up planning, things like three-way forecasting, where you have a more sophisticated logic, linking operational planning, cash flow, balance sheet, and a variety of other write-back options. Then the third thing that we see where we help our consulting partners is differentiation. As you probably know, being in this market is getting fairly crowded, so everyone is now claiming they are Power BI consultants, and having a tool like Acterys and the knowledge around data warehouse automation, and in particular around planning, forecasting, and business modeling is something where you can really differentiate yourself and get into a better competitive position. And then finally, there's a monetary aspect. Obviously, being an Acterys partner means you will profit from the success, and you will earn recurring revenues, not just initially, but on an ongoing basis. If you're interested, please contact your local partner team. In Europe, this is Michael Danninger, who is on the call here at the moment as well. What are the typical pain points that we are addressing with Acterys? It's complicated source integration. Likely every one of you is already familiar with this. The chaos of copy and paste solutions. This is not something that's really new. We've seen this now, in my case, for 25 years. Some of you have even more experience with that. And it hasn't changed a lot. You know, it gets better, and the organizations are learning, but there's still a vast user base out there that are doing things not in a very effective way. Second one is modeling challenges. So, for example, in particular with Power BI, you know, adding an initial simple table is easy, but then once you have to integrate different solutions, then typically things get way more complicated. Issues that users have to live with what IT gives them and have no option to change these things, and it gets into the old process where you have to start a case with your IT department. This will take weeks to be evaluated and executed, and it's not exactly done in the way it should be, so that you get your requirements fixed quickly. So empowering the end user is our key focus with Acterys, and you will see this in a few minutes directly in the training. No write back. As you all know, Power BI has no built-in write back functionality. So this is often a pain point. And then finally, the business logic. So reporting metrics, variances, time intelligence. Power BI is pretty good, but in a lot of cases, consultants have to build everything from scratch. And this is not really the best way if you just do repetitive things that are very similar on and on again. And then finally, obviously, three-way financial logic is something that is not part of the solution at all. So those were the typical pain points. How is Acterys addressing this, and what is the architecture? So the first part of the solution is data warehouse and model automation. So Acterys connects with a variety of accounting systems, can automatically generate optimized star schema models. The other option is to use our generic tools, where you can connect to any source, and you will see this with our Cube Wizard feature. Then once you have your data in the model, or an initial starting point of your data, then where Acterys supports you with the model, with the ongoing use of the model, is that it provides a high-performance engine to manage interaction with your data model between the front ends. So our engine uses the latest SQL technologies, either in SQL Azure or in SQL Server. and enabling extremely fast processing times. So at the moment, we can process about 20 million write-back transactions in 10 to 30 seconds. The other thing that we're doing on the model side is the logic. So to cater for typical financial requirements, where we have a variety of templates from cost center planning, HR, operating expenses, CAPEX, debt management, cash flow, approval processes, etc. This is also a great opportunity for our partners to build logic, and typically the logic that we build is built on standard Microsoft environments. So you have the option here to market your IP in our global channel. So we are now present with a customer base across the globe. We have offices in the US, in Europe, and obviously in Australia, where our headquarters is, and then also a partner network already across the globe. So the opportunity to market your solution to a big audience and just using your existing Microsoft ecosystem skills. The final part that is covered in the engine is governance and audit trails. This is a very important topic for us to enable users to be in total control of what's going on in the models, as opposed to the Excel chaos where people are changing things and you don't really know what has happened, where they can overwrite each other, and all the dramas that you're likely familiar with. In Acterys, everything gets recorded. So whatever the users are doing, model changes, data write back, it gets recorded, and you have an exact audit trail, who did what, when. The other thing is, of course, also general user rights, where you can exactly define where have the users got access to, and then more importantly, where are they allowed to write to. And with all this, again, according to our philosophy, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there's a good solution out there, we use it. So here with user management, we're not having our own user management, but we're using Active Directory, respectively Azure Active Directory. This means if you already have users in that environment, you can immediately use them with Acterys with all the related benefits. So for example, if you have groups in Active Directory, you can assign the user rights on these groups and so on. So it makes the user management side much easier. Then finally, on the front end side, to now get to these features, we offer a variety of Power BI custom visuals, in particular, of course, for write back and planning. And we offer an add-in into Excel to interact with the model. These are integrations that give you special features, but as everything in our world runs on SQL Server, you can use the model in Acterys with any client tool that can access a relational SQL Server database. So if you prefer Tableau or Click or any other solution that can access a SQL database, not a problem. You can immediately use it. Any questions so far? As we are fairly small round, I'm happy to take questions. It's probably a fairly important part here, what the architecture is like. Cool. Okay. There was a question. Yeah, Casper.
Martin, I have a question. Yeah. What if the customer already have a data warehouse and they have a good finance cube, tabular model, and they don't want to use Acterys to connect to their source system, but they want to use Acterys to connect to, so to say, an existing tabular model in their data warehouse?
That's not a problem, Casper. So we support out of the box SSAS deployment, so analysis services tabular deployment. So whatever you do gets automatically synchronized with an SSAS database. But you can also use SSAS analysis services cubes as the layer for the user. So they use their SSAS cube and write back on their SSAS cube, but the data itself gets then written back into a SQL table. And then you can just add the SQL table to your SSAS model, or query both of them at the same time. So for example, you have a table with the planning data in Power BI, and you have your normal SSAS cube in Power BI as well. So we really offer seamless integration. We are launching new features in the foreseeable future where the linking of information and virtual data warehouses. So this means the data is not physically stored in the one Acterys database, but it's stored in different solutions out there. And this can even go so far that you can build a virtual data warehouse with linking Excel spreadsheets, ODBC sources, SSAS cubes, and SQL Server. So it is possible to use SSAS as the layer for write-back, but we don't store the information directly in the SSAS tabular format, but typically in the underlying relational format. I assume in the cubes you also have some kind of relational sources where the data is stored.
Yeah, that was also what I meant by my question, actually. I just wasn't clear. Another question, what if the customer in many cases already have a Microsoft Azure environment and they maybe have already purchased their Power BI licenses, but they are missing the planning functionality and the financial consolidation functionality, etc. So that is, so to say, as I understand, some of your IP, but not all the IP that you're offering.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all. So we are completely open and agnostic in regards to where the data is stored. So we obviously have the option for users to sign on. Within 2 minutes, we provision the Azure environment and they work in the cloud. But we also give them the option to use their own environment. So this can be completely on-premise, where you install even the Acterys engine on-premise. So from an architecture perspective, so we have the database. This can either run in the cloud or can run on-premise, or it can be in your own Azure tenant. So it doesn't have to be ours. All this can be easily customized. This is just one connection string where you say, okay, what's the location of my database? So not a problem at all to use your own environment. What was the second question that you were asking? Sorry, I forgot this.
I think it was more kind of how do you, so to say, price and bundle this product. So the customers often already have an on-premise SQL Server. They maybe have, instead they have an Azure environment. They have already their Power BI in place in the company. But maybe it's interesting to, so to say, to implement your product not as a full scale, but especially the IP you have around the planning and the consolidation.
Yeah, as I said, absolutely no problem. So you can install the components alongside your existing environment, respectively use whatever databases you already have in the cloud, for example, in Azure tenants. So not a problem at all.
Okay.
Cool.
May I have a question, Martin, about the write-back from if you use tabular model as a layer to add the values or use the write-back, and then it's stored into the database. So to refresh the tabular, it means that tabular is like a direct query mode of the model or do you refresh it somehow automatically after write-back?
No, so we typically work in direct query. So as I said, at the moment, the option that's most widely used is to directly go relational, because we see less and less argument to add another layer of complexity with analysis services, where you have to use things like Visual Studio and it gets complicated and it gets not end user friendly anymore. In some cases, it's still necessary, but we have very good results working straight on the relational database, and that's what we're trying, because it just makes things easier, less expensive, much easier to handle for business users. But if you want to use your analysis service layer, we support it directly out of the box. So you have already your SSAS cube, then we typically recommend, if you want the immediate results, to set up your analysis services cube in direct query so that you get the results of your changes immediately without having to refresh.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Okay, let's go. I think I don't have to cover this too deeply. So what we mean by performance management is the typical feedback cycle between setting the strategy, planning, ongoing monitoring, and steering. This involves data sources like ERP, other internal sources, external services. You have then an analytic model. This is where Acterys supports you, particularly if the requirement is for business users to change the models and edit them. But as we discussed, this is typically part of a larger environment where the companies already have data warehouses in place or already have analysis services cubes in place, and Acterys seamlessly integrates with those ones. We have then collaboration. As you probably know, we're big fans of Teams ourselves internally. Our company runs on it. Very often this process these days runs in Teams, and we fully support this with our solutions and of course with the components that we support, in particular Power BI, but also other tools like Power Apps, Flow. So this is typically the collaboration layer for the users to work together in this process. And then we have the infrastructure components on the front end side, which is obviously Power BI, Acterys, Power Apps, Excel, and Flow. Why did we come up with this Acterys solution? Let me just have a quick look at the options that users are typically facing. So what we still see very often with our clients is that they're using Excel only models where the flexibility is great, the knowledge is widely available, it's reasonably cheap, but it becomes a problem with the next areas, in particular around maintenance, around governance. There's no single version of the truth data model. You can't do top-down logic, and the analytics and data discovery options are limited. So this is the one area. And then the other one, the other legacy option are specialized system for performance management, planning, consolidation, where the flexibility is typically much less or much lower than in Excel, where the knowledge is not widely available and you typically are relying on very expensive consultants. The software is equally expensive. Maintenance is a little bit better because you often work with a more centralized model. You typically have fairly good governance features. You have typically the single version of the truth data model, and you have the top-down write-back functionality and pretty good data discovery or fairly good data discovery options. What we are doing with Acterys is we are providing an environment that is completely flexible and offers extremely fast implementation time. So we have many examples where within one day, within a few days, our clients realize reasonably complex forecasting, planning, budgeting, consolidation processes, because the solution is providing so much out of the box. But still, as opposed to reinventing the wheel, we are just building on proven building blocks, and in particular Excel, Power Apps, Flow, and obviously Power BI. So you have the benefit of, at the moment, in our opinion, the market leading and most comprehensive analytics environment with Power BI and the related ecosystem, but then equally all your performance management functionality alongside this. Then we've already briefly discovered it, the data discovery side, so the seamless integration with the likely best analytics solutions at the moment out there, with unparalleled planning and AI support. So this is what Acterys offers, and I will show you a little bit today, but there is much more coming. So our focus we believe since the beginning of the year we've finalized the initial phase of the product development. So we have now a very stable platform that's in use by hundreds of clients across the globe, and we're focusing now on the cream, which is the AI and additional planning features. Then the knowledge availability, as opposed to the legacy specialized solution, there's a wide knowledge pool available for Power BI, for SQL, for Power Apps, for Flow. So you're not at the mercy of a single vendor. So this is in a nutshell the Acterys difference. And now I would like to jump immediately directly into the product and cover the first part, which is modeling considerations. Any questions so far? All good? Okay. So I guess all of you that I can see here are experienced analytics specialists, so I will cover this very briefly because it's likely nothing new for you. Why do you need a good data model? Is obviously performance. Maintenance, so it becomes easy to maintain, particularly around changes when you need to integrate new sources. Integration with new sources, and then the logic is a key factor as well. So if you have an effective data model, then you can implement the logic in a much easier, faster way than if you have a convolute of a not very good data model. In our world, the basis of the model, as I guess now the generally accepted principle, is a relational star schema or a star schema, where you have a fact table, and around the fact table you have dimensions that are linked to the facts via IDs. And the beauty of what Acterys is offering is that the users get these relational star schema models, so proper data warehouse models with all the data warehouse principles, but they don't see it. So they don't see these data warehousing requirements. They don't have to know anything about data warehouse. Acterys is taking care of all this automatically. So with our one-click connectors, they choose their particular accounting system, they press a button, and the Acterys connector will automatically create the star schema data model as a relational environment in Azure SQL, or if they prefer on-premise in their own SQL server. How does this look like? So again, you're likely familiar, so I will cover this very quickly. So this is typically the output. So you have your dimensions. Obviously, all this is completely up to you. So with our connectors, we generate these data warehouses or these data models. But this is in the end a normal standard relational schema. So if you want to change it, then you can obviously add, for example, your own Power BI calculations, your own DAX calculations in general, and change it to your requirements. If you build the model generically, then you have total flexibility. So we don't put you in a particular framework, but you can define the data model exactly as you want to, with unlimited number of dimensions, with whatever number of models or fact tables you need, and then obviously also the calculations. So from a dimension structure or from a model structure, the key element is obviously the dimension. So what Acterys offers, this is a fairly old slide. So you see Acterys, we used to start as agility planning. So when it was initially launched, our environment looks also a little bit different. So this slide is fairly old, but the principle is still the same. So an Acterys dimension consists of an ID that is automatically generated by Acterys that you also can't edit. You can edit if you are a database administrator, then you can do these things. In a database, you can do everything. But the normal user typically doesn't have the option to edit these IDs. They're automatically generated, and the users barely see it in the dimension. So this is the admin environment. In the admin environment, we show the ID, but this is typically something that the user don't have to worry about. Then we have one column in the dimension that is a key column for us. This is the name column. That is the main identifier. This is not the ID, but it's the main identifier that the users typically use. So you can call it a default field. And then we have a number of arbitrary additional fields as required. With these fields or with these dimensions, Acterys uses a unified modeling approach. So as opposed to having to define hierarchies, you just set up the fields that you want to provide, and then the users can build their own hierarchies on the front-end side as they want to. And you can see it just by dragging. So we allow them to simulate this in the environment, so they can say, okay, I want to have a hierarchy between calendar year, English month name, day number of weekend name, and then go down this path. But this is completely open. So as opposed to other tools, for example, like JEDOX or TM1, where you define these hierarchies in a fixed way, here the hierarchy is how you define your report. So if you drag in the report calendar year, English month name, then the hierarchy is between these. So a completely free way of how you can set these things up. Okay, so those were the dimensions. How can we create these dimensions, or in general the data model? And I will cover now the creation process. And we start with the first way. That's the easiest way. With the connectors. So let me just switch now to the actual product, so that you see the entire process. I will now sign in. So as we discussed before, typically these days our clients use it as a cloud, in the cloud, either in their own tenant or in our tenant. So in our tenant, that's typically the easiest way to start, because that takes 2 minutes to sign on. But as we discussed, if you like, you can do this in your own tenant if you have the existing Azure tenant, or you can use the whole thing on-premise completely offline. So a lot of organizations at the moment have still got policies that they don't want to use the cloud. So that's entirely possible as well. So everything can be installed on-premise as well. So here we see now the admin environment, or the power user environment, with the dimensions and what we call cubes, but in the end it is a relational table. So this is a relational database table. And the way the models work, if we look, for example, at finance, you can see this is the table. So this is the write-back table, where the data in the end will be stored. So when you're doing the write-back, when you're collecting data from the front ends, this is where it will be stored. And then you can see the dimension structure. So here at the moment we have 5 dimensions: accounts, time, cost center, organization, and scenario. That obviously completely up to you. And then the final thing here is the database. So our databases typically start with AP underscore and then a name that you can define as you want to. To create a new dimension, you can do these things manually, directly from here, copy things from Excel. Just that's the simplest way. Same with the cubes. So if you want to create a new cube, you can say, I have a new cube here, and I want to use as the dimension date, deal owner, and department group. And this creates a new cube. So you see how easy it is to create this from scratch. But what I actually wanted to show you is how do we do it automatically. So if we go to integration, into the integration menu, you will see the connectors that we have. So at the moment we have connectors to a wide variety of cloud solutions. So a solution that's not too well known in continental Europe, but it's extremely popular in Asia Pacific. They have at the moment 1.6 million subscribers in this region here. Also reasonably successful in the UK at the moment. In the continental Europe at the moment, they're not present there. So this is one connector that we have. From here, the users can just click on add, connect to the Zero environment, and it will automatically create the data warehouse. And the interesting thing is now that this is not just for a single company, but our particular strength is around consolidation. So let's say they have 20, in some cases we have clients that have 120 companies, group companies, and they want to consolidate them, but just add these companies, and it automatically creates the data warehouse of all these companies, and the option to consolidate more or less complicated. So this can be simple. So out of the box, to get a simple management consolidation where things just are added up. But then there's also the option to implement complex consolidation processes with intercompany eliminations and other specifics of statutory accounting. And then we have a few other connectors for other accounting solutions, QuickBooks, ABC, Workflow Max, and then also coming soon, this is not yet released, connectors for HubSpot and for Salesforce, where it automatically creates the data warehouse. So in the same structure as we saw before, with the dimensions and the fact tables, that they will be automatically created here. So this is the one option. The other option is to use our generic tools, and I will quickly demonstrate those now. This is a solution called Cube Wizard. Reasonably new. We've only launched this now a few months ago, but it's becoming extremely popular because it makes things so easy. So you can build a data warehouse type environment really with just a few clicks. So you can see here the Cube Wizard. So if I open up the Cube Wizard now, I have now the option to build my data warehouse on different data sources. So this can be a simple spreadsheet, this can be Power BI, or this can be an existing relational source. So those are the three that we are supporting at the moment. I'll quickly demonstrate it just with a simple Excel file. So where is my sample? So here I have a simple accounting data set, which is very typical. It's actually from the systems that we support. This is from Xero. And the structure here is we have the company name, we have the date of the transaction, we have then account codes, account names, different period aggregation, we have scenarios, we have tracking categories which are specific to Xero, where they flag transaction in a particular way, and then we have the actual value, and then we have a few more here that are in this file. And it's the same thing if you connect to a Power BI table, you would get the table that you point to, or in SQL Server the same thing in SQL Server. And you can then, in a very easy way, build your data warehouse by just specifying the name and saying, okay, this column is a dimension, and I want to call it org name. This column here, I have to call it, I already have one from the last session. This is the time. And now you have an extremely easy way to handle your time intelligence. I can say, okay, the granularity here I want to use as a month, because my planning and forecasting, the write back is only necessary on the month. I'm not that interested in the date for this model. I want to start in 2017. I want to end in 2022. I have to rename that as well. And my financial year, like here in Australia, starts in July. So then I have another one here, the account name. So I want to use the account as another dimension. So I make this a dimension. I call this account name 1. Then the third differentiator here is what we call attribute, which is just another column in the dimension, another level. So I can say here the attribute account code I want to use is my account dimension. I don't need those because the time intelligence will already do all this for me automatically. I want to use the scenario, make this another dimension that I want to call scenario, and also call it 1. And the rest, I think we can leave for the moment for this demo, and just the last thing that you typically have is here a value column. So I'm pointing now this as to be my value column. So, and then with just one click, I can immediately create my data warehouse. So this will now create the fact tables, will create the IDs, will create the dimension tables with the data as it is provided here. So this will take now a minute or two based on this file. While this is processing, you have the option to save this as a profile, so that like when you use this on an ongoing basis, you don't have to do this again and again. You just save this once, the definition of your model as a file, and then on an ongoing basis, you can process your data model based on this profile. We currently don't have the option to schedule it, but we will in the next release offer the option that you can schedule this. So you can say update my data warehouse every hour, every day, every week, whatever the interval is that you require. While this is processing, any questions? Yeah, is there a question? No question. Okay, then we have to wait and watch. Maybe while this is processing, I'll jump now to the front end side so that we don't waste our time watching this wheel spinning. So on the front end side, I'll start with, at the moment, our most popular front end, which is Power BI. So here we have a normal Power BI report with a lot of different demo pages that cover a variety of different requirements. So we have initial, dashboards with forecasts. Here we can already see one of our visuals. So this is the Acterys comments visual, which allows you to collect filter-driven comments into the data warehouse. So the users can click on the particular details. So here the filters are the date, the scenario, and the organization. And then I can enter immediately here my comments. And you have the option now to use rich text formatting. So you can change size here and a lot of other things. And you store then this comment, and this gets stored in a normal Acterys model. So you can see how this was created. So in a model like the one that we just created, which you can set up exactly as you want to. So in this case, we have defined I want to store my comments based on the scenario, on the date, and on the organization. This is now the way it will be stored. The beauty here is that you can access these comments with any front end. So if you're working in Excel, you will get the comment. If you're working with Tableau, you can access the comment, or any other front end that you're using. The comment is part of the model, as opposed to part of the front end. There is now the option in Power BI to comment on reports, but that is limited to the report. Here it's built based on the model, so you don't have to worry about a particular front end. The comments will be visible in any of the front ends. So this was an initial example of one of the Acterys custom visuals. So this is one of the custom visuals that are available in Acterys. At the moment, we have 5. This is number 2. Actually, this is the number 1 because this is the most important one. So this is called Acterys Matrix. And this allows you, it works very similar to the Power BI Matrix, but as opposed to the Power BI Matrix, it enables a lot of additional features. The first one is that you can drill down into the column, which is at the moment not possible in Power BI. So here you can do this. But then the most important feature is that you can write back. So I can now say I want to do my planning for a particular level of detail. And I want to plan my conferences. And you can see I have now immediately entered my data here. It was automatically adjusted on the total level. What I can do here now is I cannot just plan on the detail level, but I can do this on the top level as well. So I can say I want to increase this by 10%. Oops, sorry. 10%. And now it has increased this by 10%. This is obviously not just on the total level, but if I do a refresh here, I will immediately see that this was applied. In this case, it wasn't that it wasn't that interesting because there was only one underneath. But let me switch to another one where we might have some more data that this gets a bit more interesting. So here I have now a few. And again, so I could now do my planning on, so this is a quarter, here we have the month. So I can either do this on the quarterly level. So I can say, okay, my returns and adjustments are this, and my standard cost of sales are this. And then immediately I can see the total. So now I want to say here, okay, the boss wants 2,500. Oops. Put this in. And if I refresh, I can then immediately see that this will be, the difference will be broken down according to the existing distribution. So now these underlying accounts have been changed to get to the new target of 2,500. And you see how fast and easy it is. I just wanted to jump to the next visual. One of our coolest new visual that people really like is called visual planning. So this is number 3 in our visual zoo. So here you can see now the new, fairly new Acterys visual planning visual. And what visual planning allows you is to do your data entry directly on a chart. So as opposed to putting a number into a matrix, the users can now click on a chart and drag this to the value that they want. So I have we'll go a little bit down in the sports category, we'll go up in road, and let's go up a little bit in mountain. So once you have added these changes, you can see how really fast it is. So if you want to simulate, it just takes a click. And we had 12.9 million revenues and 2.7 million gross profit. And you can see now immediately, based on the changes that I've made, what are the implications. So a very cool way of planning where you just drag directly on the chart and you write back the value into the database. And again, you have to keep in mind that underneath here, I have a few hundred products in every category. So this was, again, a top-down operation that distributed the values on a detail level to all the products in these product categories. So if I look on the product level side, I will immediately see, okay, based on my drag and drop, what were the changes. So this was visual number 3. Visual planning is already available in the Power BI App Store as well. So in the meantime, I had a few questions. One is it possible to have more details about how do you automatically create the data warehouse? Is it just importing all the table from the ERP system you connect to, and then naming conventions, table and column name? Okay, we'll get to this. The text value needs parsing in Excel. That could be correct, yes, because this is stored in HTML. So we're using rich text format here to store the text. And if you access this in Excel, you will need an option to parse the entry in the comments visual that's stored in the database. So then we had, it's a really nice feature, suggestions allow snapping to clean increments. Okay, David asked for this. David, you can read our mind. The latest version, we can try this right now. I only got it yesterday. Let's try this together. This is an interesting question. The latest version of visual planning supports this. So let's have a look. So here at the moment, I have version 1.07. Let's add the latest one. This is not yet in the marketplace, so this is something at the moment I only have, but we will publish it in the marketplace and in the visual downloads as well. So this is visual planning 1.1. So this is the latest version. So if you use it from the marketplace, then this will automatically update when we update it in the marketplace. So you don't have to necessarily update this manually if it's already there, but in this case, this is really so brand new, there's nothing there. So another big moment comes, and see if this is there now. Yeah. So David, your question, so you have now the option to rounding to nearest. So we can do rounding to the nearest 1,000. This is now very exciting for me. I have never seen this before. as well. So let's see if this works now. Yeah, and you can see it works. So now I can only do my planning to the nearest 1,000, which makes the planning obviously much easier. I hope this answers your question, David. This was a bit of a ad hoc trial where we fixed now, I hope what you mentioned. So can you please all enable all panelists in attendance when posing questions? We can't see if it's private. Can you please all enable all panelists? Okay. So in general, what I would recommend, I hope you can see this on my screen. So there is a Q&A section in the webinar. So if it's a question that you would like everyone to see, then write it in Q&A and not in the chat, please. And if you do it in the chat, then do it to all attendees. I hope this is what Thomas was asking for. Then we had, how is the increase or decrease amount impact the detail row level when using the planning visual? So when you enter data on an aggregate level, it will use the existing distribution to break it down. So let's say you had a product here in sport, you had two products. One product A, 100, and another product 200. Then it will, the difference will be applied based on the existing distribution. So let's say you add 100, then the 100 product will get 1/3 and the 200 product will get 2/3. So then we had just switched that in chat news. I'm guessing it works. Okay, so this was just in regards to the question and answer. So the historical ratio. So Romain was asking about the distribution. It depends. So if there's nothing there, it will assume equal distribution. If you have something there, then it will use the existing distribution. So if it's completely zero, it is equal. But normally what happens is, okay, so finally, cool. So here it is set up. So this is now a Power App that we have, a template to copy scenarios. So for example, and I think this is the question that I see from Romain. All right, so I'm doing my new budget now in 2020. And what I want to do is I want to use my distribution, like the actual distribution, for example. So I choose actual here. And then you can, again, break this down and filter. So you can set this up in whatever way you want. We also have a template in Power Apps that is completely dynamic. So the users can choose any dimension, any column to filter things. But so just to quickly see this, I want to use now as the basis, the historical distribution of the actuals in 2019. Let's say we just want to limit this for revenues at the moment. The target is also revenues. And I want to copy this now. So this is copying now the distribution, or actually the data from 2019, the actuals, into the 2020 budget. And you have then the option, oops, I did this now again. Let me just close this. You have then the option, when you go to 2020, you have the data from 2019, and then you can just adapt it. You can say, hey, I want to have a 20% increase here. I want to have this change there. And when you're doing your entries, it will use the distribution of the actuals in this period. And as this is now completely flexible to set up, so you can set up the filter here and the criteria of what kind of distribution you want to use in exactly that way. You can also do this manually. It's probably not that straightforward, but let's say you want to have a distribution here of 1 there and 3 there. You just enter the number, and then you say, okay, I want now 10,000 here. So then it will apply this distribution. Sorry, I haven't refreshed. It will apply then this distribution that was set up in this level of detail. So I have now 2,500 here and 7,500 there. So this is the typical way of how you deal with using existing distributions. And then you can take this to the nth level. You know, we have options now to, for example, as opposed to using existing distributions, use forecasting methods like exponential smoothing, ARIMA, and so on, and write back the forecasted value based on these scenarios into the database. And this, in the end, is just a configuration of the Power Apps here that's connected with the Acterys database and using the write-back API of Acterys. And you can set this up in whatever way you require. So, to accomplish the forecasting, budgeting scenarios that you need to. Did this answer your question, Romain? Cool, perfect. Okay, great. All right, so we had two visuals. Now I'm showing you the latest one, that's very new, that I think is just a few weeks old at the moment, but it's a very nice one. So we previously worked with Power Apps to do edit dimension scenarios. So for example, if I look at this report here, I hope this one has a Power App. So you can see this is Power Apps, and the experience is a bit clunky. It takes a while to load, and then I can go there and edit my record. It's okay, but obviously to build this, you need to know Power Apps and configure this. In some cases, this is necessary because you need some additional functionality. But we are now offering another option with the table edit visual. So this is now the fourth visual in our store, where you have the option to choose the table. So this can be any Acterys table, so any dimension in Acterys, but we also give you the option now to link any relational table. So if you have a table that is not set up in Acterys, so setting up in Acterys means you have created the dimension in Acterys. So you either went through the connector and created it automatically from the source system, or you did it from the Cube Wizard and it was created from the Cube Wizard, or you did it manually. But these are all in the end tables. So these tables, if I select one of them, this is a different database now. So this is the partner training demo. This here is the generic demo database. So you can see I can select a table now, for example, scenario, and the users can then directly from Power BI enter the data directly from Power BI. And as you can see, extremely fast. So this is much faster than this again. This is on the second page. So this is, I only had 5 showing here, so this is on the second page. So the users can edit the dimension exactly as required, and of course all the features here directly in Power BI without any access and any knowledge of relational tables, but directly here in Power BI. So, okay, let me just see if we have some questions here. Are there any limits on the number of underlying accounts that can be updated and adjusting high-level figure in Acterys? Jeff was asking, are there any limits when we call this splashing. So when you enter data on an aggregated level, we call it splashing. So Jeff wants to know if there are limits. There's actually no limits, but we have a parameter in the server configuration, splashing, number of splashing. Let me see if I find this quickly. So if you look here in the database, everything is configured also in the database. So the admins can configure things directly in the database, so they don't have to go anywhere else, or they can do it in the front end. So I show it quickly here in the front end. So this is in all our parameters. And here we have a limit in there, the maximum level of splashes. So how many data points can a user change in one go? So this is not getting opened here. So now here you can see splash cells. So this parameter here gives the maximum threshold of how many cells can I change in one go, and this is 20,000. Why are we doing this? So that you can control what's happening. In some cases, users are doing things that they likely not intend and potentially would change millions of values. So if they write on a very aggregated level, this could modify millions of cells. And we want to avoid this, that the server gets a massive load on it, because people are, likely by accident modifying millions of cells. So in this parameter, you set up how many splashes you want to allow. I hope this answered your question, Jeff. So this was a quick overview on the front end side. So you saw our standard visuals. In addition to that, we have now a wide variety of templates, typically using Power Apps and Flow, Microsoft Flow, two standard products that cover particular requirements. So you saw already the employee planning. So here the users can manage their employees. They can add new employees, either just a role or a particular employee. They can set the start and end date. They can put a salary in, and this will then automatically calculate, the on cost for this employee. This will calculate, superannuation and whatever it is. So this is a sample of one of these Acterys apps, we call them, that cover particular areas, and we have now a wide variety. So this was HR. So this is one for debt management and financing. So here the users can manage finance instruments. Okay, good, this is working. So here we have now loans, and the users can plan for loans. So they have put in whatever the financing instrument is, a bond or whatever it is, the start date, how long is the repayment period, what's the amount of loan that I'm taking, in what intervals am I doing the repayments, what's the interest, and then in what scenario do I want to do this. So this is an example of one of the template apps, again, that you can configure to your needs. What it comes down to in the end is what I've referred to already before as the three-way forecasting logic. So you have a connection and relationship from sales planning, operating expenses, HR planning, capital expenditure, debt management to cash flow. So you can immediately see, if I increase my sales, what impact has this got on my cash flow? If I, for example, here we have a problem. So I can see in this particular period, in June, I have a problem. My cash goes below the red line, although this is the cash movement. So the cash balance is still okay, so we don't necessarily need a loan, but we can see in this period we have a negative cash flow. So what I can then do, I can immediately say, okay, this looks like I need a loan, and can put in a loan, or I can increase my expense estimates. I can adapt my sales forecast. I can say, okay, if you go negative here, I need to improve my sales planning. And you have this connection between profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow. And so this is what we call it, or not we, this is in generally called the three-way forecasting logic. So this was an overview of how things work in Power BI. I just quickly want to switch now to Excel, that you see the final front end as well, just to get a feel what it can do. So in Excel, we have an add-in that gives you pretty much the same functionality that you've seen in Power BI now, but it's running in Excel. So initially, the users connect to the server. So you saw before, this server name was editable. This is, we cater for on-premise installation. So normally, this is the default. So if you're using the cloud, at the moment, we only have the one server. We, in the future, at the moment, planning to have servers for different locations. So we already have one in the EU, and we will have another one in the US. So you will be able to use cloud servers in different regions. As we discussed, you can also set everything up in your own cloud server. So if you want to use your own Azure environment, that is also possible, and then you would need to adapt this. So in my case, I'm using a normal cloud environment. Oops, this was the wrong user. I'll probably have to do it again. So, okay, but I don't want this user, I want another one. So the power user, this is typically our demo user. So I wanted to use that one. So now I'm connected, and I can do now the Acterys feature. So here we have a pivot table now, and it works in the same way as how it works in Power BI. So you create your report. So here I've got filters for calendar year, the financial statement, the company, the quarter, wherever this is. This is, I'll see it in a second. So this is the cost center. So I can choose now my particular detail that I want to use, for example, a particular cost center, and the report will automatically adapt. So you can already see Excel, unfortunately, is a little bit slower than Power BI. It's okay, and there's ways how you can improve things, but it is unfortunately a little bit slower than Power BI. And the key reason here is that the pivot tables are still using MDX, and so they have to run MDX against the server. And this is a bit slower than if you go DAX in Power BI. So I have now here my pivot table. You saw I can change this, so I could take things out or put them in. So for example, if you want to see now the account group, I can search for account group, which is just a field in my dimension, and drag this into the report. So now I should get a nice profit and loss statement by account groups. In the meantime, while this is refreshing, there was a question, is there a plan to continue to integrate the functionality of Edge use cases that Power Apps currently caters into Acterys functionality? Yes. So we already can, particularly now with the new table edit visual, we already can cater for most of the things that you do in Power Apps now in a different way. I'm not saying that the Power Apps is bad, but if there are limits to Power Apps. So for example, if you're in a cloud environment, there is no Power Apps. So Power Apps requires a cloud installation. So if you have, for example, an on-prem Acterys installation, on-prem SQL Server, and your company has a no cloud policy, then there is no Power Apps. So you need to have an alternative. And we are providing this, as you saw before, with the new table edit visual. And then we implement the functionality typically directly in SQL Server as triggers. So for example, if someone writes on a particular table using Acterys, then something should happen. And you can set this then up in whatever way you like, these triggers and these functionalities. With Power Apps and Flow, obviously this is a little bit more elegant and easier for the business users, but you have the full flexibility if you do it in this trigger way that I've just mentioned before. Okay, I hope now everyone can see the screen. Okay, so there was a question now, how are we connecting to the database? And in Excel, there's two options. You can either connect to the relational database directly, but then you don't have direct query because there's a limitation in Excel that there is no direct query is not supported in Excel. So what we are doing is, as opposed to connecting to the database, we are connecting via Power BI. So if we look here at the connection properties, this is actually a Power BI, but this is really just, we're using Power BI as a metadata layer. Nothing is stored in Power BI. Power BI is connected via direct query to the underlying relational database. So any query here goes straight to the relational database in real time. So we are achieving direct query now in Excel as well. Direct query to a relational database in Excel via Power BI in between. Okay, so there was a question now about the Acterys data model and you know, why the data warehousing and how this looks like. And I guess for you, as all of you likely experts already, for you this will be clear. So there's performance reasons for a good star schema data model. There's maintenance reasons. So it becomes much easier to maintain if it's a good star schema model. The integration becomes easier if you want to integrate different sources. It's much better if you have normal, well-defined star schema model. And then finally also the logic, if you define calculations, particularly with DAX, if you have a badly organized table in Power BI, then the DAX calculation becomes much more difficult than if you have a well-defined model. And so what we're using is a normal star schema that you likely all will be familiar with. So we have dimension tables and we have a fact table. And these dimensions are connected to the fact table via IDs. And Acterys handles all this automatically. So the user don't have to worry about, is this ID correct, and so on. And as you can also see in the fact table, we're storing the ID, which makes things from a performance perspective much better because we're searching and we're processing on IDs and not on names. It's something that typically the amateur Power BI user will always have the facts directly in the fact table. So here, this is the structure that we're using with Acterys. And if you look at this now, you know how it really looks in the database. If it's we have typically two types of tables. We have the staging tables, and here we get the information as it comes from the source system. So this is now the tables as they come, for example, from Xero. These are the tables as they come from Workflow Max. And then we have what we call the OLAP tables, the Acterys table structure. And so in the end, this structure, let's go to the next one, this typically looks like this. So you have your fact table, and with Acterys, you have the amount column, then you have the keys for all the dimension tables that are used, and then we have the text value here, which is where the comments are stored. So if you're storing unstructured information in Acterys, then this is where it's stored. So it's always dimension IDs, amount, and text values. This is the virgin state of the Acterys table. But then typically in Power BI, in the models, the users are adding more, and we are also providing them out-of-the-box metrics. So for example, for variances and a lot of other things. So this typically gets extended. So this is not a Power BI view. In the table, we typically only have this. Although you can, if you want to, I mean, this is in the end just a standard relational table, you can put your own stuff also in the SQL table. So you can add to the Acterys table and have your own column here for your own purposes. So for example, for your own calculations. And then there's a relationship, then always a one-to-many relationship between the dimension and the fact table. So if we look now at the data, there was a question, what does the structure look like? So this obviously depends on the source system. So this will look different in Xero, this will look different in Workflow Max, and so on. In this case, we have Xero. So with Xero, we have typically two tables that we create out of the box, which is all the journals and manual journals, and they end up in a table called Finance. And then we have all the invoices and credit notes, incoming invoices, so bills, outgoing invoices, and credit notes. They're all in this fact table, and then we have the respective dimension tables around it. So this is what's coming out of the box for Xero. It looks again a little bit different in QuickBooks. In QuickBooks at the moment, you don't even have a process that creates it automatically. You have to use the staging tables in QuickBooks and use them as you want to. So this doesn't create the data warehouse for QuickBooks at the moment completely automatically. I will show you in a second. This is what we'll cover in the next step, how CubeWizard works. So with CubeWizard, you can create all this as you need to for any data source. But just in general, as the question was there, with Xero, for example, we give you all objects that the API provides. So all tables that are available in the Xero API are available in Acterys as well. So, from cash journals, payments, whatever it is here. And the same for QuickBooks. We also give you, I think, all of the QuickBooks tables as well. So let me just quickly check if there was another question. No, it looks like everything is good. Okay, cool. So this is star schema. Let's see. I guess I don't have to tell you this here. So in the Acterys dimension, you have the option also to create your hierarchies on the fly. It's the same way how Power BI works, but this is just for viewing purposes. So if you look at an Acterys dimension, for example, if you go to the accounts here, and you want to show them in hierarchy mode, the users can build their own hierarchies. I can say, okay, I want to have the account class at the top and then the account name underneath. And now I have a navigation here from account class to the account. But as you see, we don't have any fixed hierarchies in Acterys. So in Acterys, we're using what's called unified modeling. So you have tables with hierarchy levels, and then the users can use on the front-end side these hierarchy levels as they want to. So we don't force them into a course that you have to set up, okay, this is account group and then account name and then level 1 and then level 2. The users, when you build the report, you can just put the levels into the report that you need, and it's super easy to edit. And some users might have the option to edit this, and some users don't. So this is how this works. In the dimension, you create the hierarchies. As I mentioned before, this either is done automatically from the source system, so these hierarchies, or you can then extend them. So you can say I have a new hierarchy, which is the Martin mapping. So now I have this new hierarchy in my account dimension. And then you can directly maintain the Martin mapping here. So I can say this is now, I don't know, A, this is B, this is A again, and this is B. And then when you look at this on the front-end side, you will see you have this new hierarchy here, and then I can say, okay, I want Martin mapping, and if I get then from A, I can do the drill down into accounts payable and into advertising, and then from B into accounts receivables and into advertising and marketing. So the users can create their hierarchies as they want to. And the coolest thing is what our users really like is, I mean, this is okay to edit things here, but it's even better if you do this in Excel. So we give you an option in Excel to edit all the dimensions, similar to what you saw before in Power BI. So the users can say, I want to, maybe let's do this for the one that we have here. So I will connect now with the particular user that I'm using here, so it's the partner training user. So this is a convention that is always in use. So if it's in the cloud, then the first user, the admin user, will always have this an email address like this. So it will be called, as the database is called, so my database is called partner training, so it will be called database name @Acterys on Microsoft.com. So it will always be for the admin user @Acterys on Microsoft.com. So this is an AAD account, Azure Active Directory user in our domain. Subsequently, you can add your own, but the admin in the cloud version is always on our in our environment. So I've logged in now in Excel with this new user. So if I go now to edit dimension, we should see the dimensions that I've just created, and we should see also the new things that I've done here. But you have to be careful. We typically give our users two databases, AP demo, which is a sample database. So you can switch the database here at the top. So if I switch now, I'm getting the AP demo database, which is just a sample database to give you an idea of how things are set up. And has a lot of the typical requirements like models and dimensions. And you can play around with this. And you have your own database. So this is the one that you're just working on before. So the partner training one. So now if we are in Excel, I can now access the demo. You can see the demo here, AP demo, and I can access my own. So just be careful that you choose the right database. And in the beginning, users make the mistake and they look here, oh, it's not there. But it's typically at the end, it's something that we probably have to reconsider to have a list box here that starts with the customers one and not with the demo one. But so here I can, now let's go to the account one. So you can see now here, those are my accounts. Then let's save this before. Looks like I forgot to save this. Anyway, I'll do it here now. So here, what our users really like, and particularly the finance users, so they have now all the flexibility of Excel. So I can now say, hey, these accounts are, I'm just doing this now for a demonstration purpose. This is obviously not factually correct. Something, this is, I want to group this into assets, this is revenue. And edit your dimension here, so you can use all the features in Excel. You can use copy and paste. So a really simple way of editing stuff. So you edit your mapping here, and then the only thing you have to do is go to Acterys on the add-in and click on publish. And these changes are then automatically in the central data warehouse or in the central data model. So if I click refresh here, we should see now the new mapping definitions that I've just added here. So now you can see the mapping was populated. So I have now all these mapping things that I've added, and this is something that the users really love, particularly the zero users. For them, it's very hard to map accounts, and here, you know, just with a few simple Excel steps, they can map their accounts now in whatever way they want to. You know, this, for example, for the hotel group that just signed on, they had this issue. They have tracking categories. They want to group the tracking categories. They have accounts. They want to group them in the way they want to. They have, for example, different revenue types. They want to easily add them all to, you know, I don't know, liquor revenues and gaming revenues and this and that. And it's in the database. So it doesn't matter what Power BI file you're using. It doesn't matter if you're using an Excel. It's all in the central database. You have these options, some of them in Power BI as well, where you can build your own aggregations. But this is obviously not as powerful as here. So you can just add elements to a particular grouping, where here the users can do whatever they want. So this was just a quick example of editing. One thing for our experienced users here that you potentially haven't seen, we have a new functionality in the dimension edit where you can link columns. So this means we had the requirement that people were telling us, customers, and said, hey, I don't want to have this free text. I only want to allow my users a particular thing to choose from here. So they can only choose from asset, equity, liabilities, whatever it is. And we have now a new functionality where you can set this up. And I'm just demonstrating this quickly now. So I'm going here to link column. And in linked column, you can then set up what is the relationship. So you can specify what is the source and what is the target. And I'm just showing it now as a simple example. So I'm having here the target dimension is the account. The target column is the new Martin mapping. The source is scenario, and the source column is name. This obviously doesn't make a lot of sense in this context, but just to show you the principle. So if I save this now, I have now saved this linked column definition. And if I go back to the dimension, they will fix this very quickly. So, so this was a quick overview of linked dimensions. Let me just see what else we have on our list here. Okay, so there was a question now, security. You have both options, Jeff. So you can either use RLS, so row level security for those that know Power BI, where you define the security in Power BI, or you can use the database security. So you apply the security directly on the Acterys relational database. So you have both options. In some cases, you need to go via the relational security because RLS will only give you read security, whereas with Acterys, we need write-back security as well. And the way this works is you have a table in the database. Every database has this table, which is called sec.cube-data. And this is the security for write-back. And it works similar to the read security in RLS. So in the end, this is a relational table, and you just set up your security rules. And in the end, it stacks again. So here you can see you have these rules. So I have one rule here. What model is affected? So this is the ID of the fact table. So in this case, 39. Who did it? when was it done, what users are affected, and what is the rule. So in this case, all the users are affected, and no one can write on actual. So this is a safe rule that we put in typically on every database. So the ones that we automatically generate with the connectors, that no one can change actuals. Show you now how things look like in the database. So this is now Power BI, and I'm looking now at our partner training database, and I can see now all the tables here. Let's see if the database was already created. Yeah, so I can see here the one that we just created should be finished now. Oh, it's still running. It looks like it's still doing things, still probably importing data, but the table is already there. So I can see this table now, and as we discussed, the convention is always OLAP schema, cube if it's a cube, so if it's a fact table, underscore name of the model, underscore WB, WB stands for write back. So here you have now the the raw data warehouse table, which is using the IDs. So I can see now those are the records in the table, and this is connected to the ID of these dimension tables. So ID 1, ID 1, ID 1, and for the date we're using a long ID, which is 2018-0801. Empty the text value, and the value is 148. So what you can do now in Power BI is, let's say we want to work with this. The easiest, so there's not two ways. I'll show you, hope we have enough time, but something that none of you have seen already. We haven't even launched it yet. We have a new Acterys connector that allows you to do this, what we are doing here on the raw relational database in an easier way, and I'll show you this quickly. So, but if you do it in the relational database, this is what you do. You just say, okay, this is my cube, my model. This is now finished here. So if we look at this here, we will see now the outcome. I will see the definition of this model. So I can see this is the name of the table. We saw this already here. So this is called cube partner underscore WP. So this is the main fact table. Then we have also a lot in our system happened through stored procedures. We see this is the stored procedure that's used here. And then we have the dimensions. So we have org name 1, account name 1, scenario 1, and date 1. And then the database is partner training. This is the database where all this is stored. If you want to have a quick look at it, you can immediately go there, take, for example, oops, let's put this in the rows and take this in the columns. So now you get an overview of the data that was loaded into this model directly also in the modeler. Typically, this is predominantly for just checking values. This is not really an end user tool. This is not a reporting tool. This is just to show you if your data was properly imported. So this is what happened in the background. Obviously, we created the dimensions. If we look at the account name 1 dimension, we will see, you can see now the structure of the Acterys tables, ID field, name field, which is the main field, which is that's a requirement in Acterys. So these two are mandatory. There always has to be an ID and the name. The rest is up to you. And you see the two other columns that we added here. So if you're now in Power BI, I can load this now. And we have now both options. We typically use direct query if you want to see the results immediately. I forgot one thing. One thing that's important, unfortunately, Microsoft is still letting us down and is not giving us an option to do Active Directory authentication in Power BI custom visuals. They promised this now for years that this would come, and I've spoken to the head of the visuals last week again, and she promised this would be available soon. Hasn't given me a time frame, but I hope this is this side of this year. And so there's one step that I forgot that you don't have to do anymore. What we need to do now is we have now a bit of a workaround here where we are automatically generating what's called a service account table, where we do the Active Directory authentication ourselves. So this is now a table that when you're working with Acterys, you have to have in your Power BI model. This is not necessary in Excel, but in Power BI you have to do this. So this table has to be part of the equation. You will see in a second why I'm using this. So now I have my data model here. This is obviously working like any other data model in Power BI. I can take now, for example, the amount column here. I want to see this by the account name. And I don't know, let's take the scenario in the column. It's also a bit slow, you know, I don't know why. Okay, while this is going, so we have the standard Power BI visuals, but when you're working with Acterys, you obviously have new visuals that you have to use when you're using the write-back functionality in Acterys. So all the visuals are typically in the download area in Acterys, and not just all the visuals, all the components that you need. So we have, for example, for the Excel add-in, we have the two Excel add-in installations for 32-bit and 64-bit installations. We have the comments visual, which is one of the visuals, the matrix visual. We have here, this is just a bit of a tip for the demo database if you want to use the Power BI demos. We have a calendar table generator, which is honestly not that necessary anymore with CubeWizard because CubeWizard does all this perfectly. But if you want to do this, this is a SQL script to generate calendar tables. And here we have templates now for particular accounting systems. So we have a template for zero databases. We have a template for Power BI for Acterys. So as I mentioned before, Acterys automatically generates reports based on the accounting system. So when they sign on, they get immediately this report out of the box. Let me see where it is. Acterys connected. No, it's not here in this database. I show you one here. Okay. Let me just switch to another user. So it automatically generates the Power BI report. So the users there for Xero or QuickBooks, they don't have to worry about what we are doing here. They get all this automatically there, and then they can just add new reports as they want to. So just to show you this quickly, I'm going to sign on to Power BI now and show you what comes out of the box. So this is Power BI. So to use now the demo. If you use now the download area, you just download, for example, the matrix. So now I have this PBVIZ file, PBIVIZ, and this is the custom visual. So I just add this custom visual now to my report. So and now I just switch this report to the custom visual for the write back, and this will now immediately give me a matrix with the option to enter data into. The only thing that's missing here are a few configuration steps, and the first one is, as I mentioned before, is we need to bypass, or we need a workaround for this Active Directory authentication. And the way this works is in the service account table that you have loaded, you have two columns, key and name, and these you need to drag into the visual. And you drag the key into first key, and you drag the name one into principal. With the user, you create, there's different ways of doing it now. The quickest and easiest way is to hard code it. Normally this would be this is obviously the current user. For our purposes here, I will just hard code it to a particular user. I'll show you both options. So you create a new measure. No, I don't know what's going on here. Why is this all taking so long? No, come on. This is just a new measure. So we have now a new measure here. You can call this whatever you like. I call it user here. And now there's two options. You can either do it generic. So this will automatically read the generic user. The problem is this returns a Windows user in Power BI Desktop, and it doesn't work. In Power BI Desktop, it wouldn't give it our visual can't interpret the Windows username. It needs the full email name. So if you publish something on the web, you can use this. But if you wanted to see how it works in the desktop, we do a workaround here and hard code a user. So I'm just putting in my username here, hard coded, so partner training at acterys.onmicrosoft.com. And then this measure, you just drag this into the current user field in the Acterys matrix. So this looks a bit cumbersome, but this is a once-off thing. If you have this once in your data model, then for everything else, it's just dragging the three fields there. So it's typically fairly straightforward. So now we have our new measure here. I just drag this into the current user field. And then the only thing left is now the details. What cube do you want to use? So the cube in my case is called partner. And the database is called AP_partner training. So you remember we had in the modeler, the database name is in the top left. You can also see it when you're going into the model, you can see what the database is called. But the easiest way is to see it on the top left. You will see the database name there. So AP_partner training. All our databases start with AP_, and then the rest is up to you. So we have now set up the fields here, and if I'm lucky, the write back works. So you can see here at the moment this is completely unprotected. We only have this actual scenario here. Let me just see. I think this is the zero suppression because we had another scenario here. Did we add one? No. Okay, I'm just adding this here. This shows the power a little bit. So I'm adding now a new scenario. Let's call this forecast. So we have now the new scenario here. And now I can immediately do my planning here. So I can say, okay, for this period, I'm planning now 60,000, accounts receivables, 40,000, and so on. So you do the write back directly in Power BI. This was, and this I did a little bit what I just told you not to do, because this was a massive splash. If you look now at the log in the modeler, and the log is a table like any other table in Power BI. So you can see all the tables here. This is the log that contains all the operations that happen in the system. So you see here, I splashed 40,000 on these details. And then whatever other things we did, they all get recorded here. So you have always an overview of what went on in the system. So this user, did this splash in the system. So 40,000, 60,000. And you can see where I did it. So I did it on the org name, on everything. I did it on the date, also on everything. And I used a particular account here, the accounts receivable. And I used a particular scenario called forecast. So, but what this meant was that this was now splashed on every date in my model, so on all the dimensions. So to every organization, org 1, every date 1, did get now a part of it. So what you normally should do is you should make sure that you have a reference to the other dimensions in the visual as well. So I'm typically adding the org name as a filter and the date as a filter. This could obviously also be any one of the other ones. So you can see here now what the splash did. Sometimes with these splashes, it creates a large number of decimals. So in that case, it's typically good to use just the Power BI format, so the Power BI number format, and turn this, for example, into a currency, and then all those will be gone. The rounding at the rounding, this is all gone and it's showing correctly. So this was just a quick workflow from start to finish, building the cube in the cube wizard, connecting to the relational database from Power BI, and then adding the visual. And here I could not use any visual. So for example, if you want to turn this into the visual planning visual, you just import that as well, and then it's very easy to turn the matrix into the visual planning options. So let's just do this. It's potentially what did it shows here? The amount, the name was the account. This will be a lot of accounts, so this will probably be a big chart. I will filter it a little bit. Cool. While this is loading, I'll show you one other thing. We're getting to the end of the training. So I guess you got a bit of an insight on how things work. If you want to now go on, we have a quite detailed wiki. So if you click here on wiki, you get to a Confluence environment. It has all the manuals, has trainings, and everything gets explained here. So you have good search functionality here as well. So whatever we discussed today and much more, so we obviously in 2 hours can only cover you know, parts of things, but if you're interested in all the details, you can just check everything here, how to get started, you know, the options in the modeler, how the visuals work, how you can import data into Acterys. All these things are covered here. So here we have now the visual planning visual. So here I don't need to do any configuration. The configuration was already done, so that's all good. So let me just switch to make this a bit clearer to a few accounts. We probably also have it here, but then I would need to create a new measure for the forecast, so I'll leave it for the moment. So here we have now the filter. We can see our bars, and now I can do, but there's probably a few things that I will do now here. So this is now, we didn't specify a particular scenario here. So I will now change this to a particular scenario. So let's make this, but then we should have a little bit of data, but maybe not in those ones. Okay, I'll leave it, just it doesn't make a lot of sense now because we're mixing up multiple scenarios in this. Maybe let me just choose. I'll just change the actuals. Something that typically as an accountant you probably would get a fit if they see that I'm changing actuals like this. But for you in this training, for training purposes, I do it. So I just filter this now on actuals. Otherwise, if I hadn't done this, it would filter on the total of actuals and forecast, which is probably even worse. So now the actual filter gets applied, and here I can now do my planning, as we discussed before, directly to the greatest thousands, as I want to change the values from a negative to a positive, even if I like, or change it in whatever way I want. And once I'm finished with my changes, I just click on save, and then this result will be saved back as you know, as any other Acterys value, the distribution spread onto the lowest level in the database. So you saw a little bit the process how Acterys works, from the model management in the modeler, the connectors in integration, the generic data warehouse automation in the Cube Wizard. You saw how you can edit dimensions in the model, how you can view your dimension, how the audit trail works. Then we had a look at the front-end side, so how to connect to the Acterys database, how to use the Acterys visuals, and it works in exactly the same way in Excel. So if you want to do the same thing in Excel, so what I normally would do here is I would publish this model to Power BI, so that if I have tax calculations here, I have all my metadata, my calculation data, also available in Excel. So I would publish this and then connect to this model from Excel. This will give you a pivot table. Let me see if I have one there. So the one that you already saw. So I just take now this one, as we're really running out of time. I'll just take this one. So this will give you a pivot table, but then in this pivot table, the users have the option to edit their data. So they can directly write back. So this has not timed out, so I just have to do it again. So and can enter the data directly here in, I think I'm logged on with the wrong user here now. So when you're working with a pivot table, you typically want to make sure that you have the right cube selected here. In my case, this is a report for a different database, so I have to connect to the right one. So you have now all the options that you have in Excel: copy and paste, drag and drop for doing your planning. Typically, people like this very much. If the flexibility, particularly the finance people. But horses for courses. So this is not a very flexible option, and in Power BI you have the more closed down, user-friendly option where the options are restricted. Also, in many cases, a good thing to have. You also have the option here to enter calculations. So you can say, I want this times this. And once you're finished, you just press on commit, and these changes are then written back into the underlying Acterys relational database. So these are the features here. So when you're working with a pivot table, you have to enable the edit. So this is what you can do here. The commit change will write it back. You can reject what you did. Bulk import is importing data from Power Query results. So, for example, if you have a Power Query result and you want to load this to Acterys, that's what this one does. Or you can also, any Excel data. To be honest, with Cube Wizard, not that relevant anymore these days, because Cube Wizard, as you've seen, is a bit more easy to use. We have copy values, which is an important one. So this is now the full powerful copy function where you can copy from anywhere to anywhere. So you can choose here, that's my source, and this is the target, and you can choose anything. You can choose any column in the data warehouse in your table and copy data exactly the way you want to. This is coming back to Romain's question about, what is it if I want to use existing distributions and historic distributions and all this. Send reports, which is a feature in Excel to, let's say you have an Excel workbook and you want to send this as a PDF document. This gives you the option to send this as a PDF document customized for the recipient. So the recipient will only get that data. So for example, you specify a filter here for organization A, and the user is a@a.com. Then the user A will get the report, everything filtered to organization A. So this is what send report does. This is the application configuration. This is just a general about box. And here we have the editing that you have already briefly seen when we edited the dimensions in Acterys before, for example, the account name. So this concludes the training. I have taken a bit more time. Sorry, I've taken 15 more minutes than I promised. But I think we have really now achieved to cover everything. I hope I've answered your questions. If there are any more questions, please let me know. I can't see anything, so it looks like everyone is happy. Let me just social media followers. So what would really help us if you follow our social media channel. So if you go to this link, share this with all of you in the chat. Oh, this says all panelists. All panelists in attendance. Let's do this. Then you can just click here and subscribe, and this would help us a lot. Because other thing that might be interesting for you, we've got a blog that is typically quite helpful for users. So this is called manageability.blog. That typically helps a lot. This is just general Power BI stuff. And then we have the same thing also for Acterys, where it's called the Acterys blog, where you can see a lot of articles and things that we publish. And then finally, what really helps us as well, if you review us in the marketplaces, in particular in the Zero marketplace, if you do a quick review there, I'll share the link with you. Just 2 lines and however many stars you think you want to give us. This really helps us because this is driving the position in the Zero marketplace. And at the moment, we're in our position on page number 1, but still not where we like to be. In particular, also there's a lot of apps in front of us at the moment that I honestly would not consider on par with what we offer. And this is just because they probably got a few more friends or professional light gatherers in India that got them more reviews. So you can see we are here at the moment at the end, and the more reviews you have, the higher we are listed. So this would really help us if you have a minute just to put in a quick review here in the Zero marketplace, and the same in QuickBooks. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this initial session, the first one of its kind that we're doing, this online training for partners. I hope it was useful for you. I'm of course available for any questions if you have more questions. And yeah, I hope I have a chat with you soon, maybe becoming a partner or meeting you anywhere else, also hopefully in real life, not just online. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and goodbye from Byron Bay.